Good morning and welcome to NC Climate Week. We're in our third day. There's been some wonderful content so far. One of the questions we get asked every time is, are you recording this? And we are. And so any of the recordings and sessions that you weren't able to attend this week will be available to you. But today, we're here. The folks who have participated so far are here because we all have a role to play in avoiding the worst impacts of climate change. And in addition to the UN's targets for 45% reduction in global greenhouse gases by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050, as if those aren't motivation enough, of course, closer to home, we have the urgency that's felt in the aftermath of Helene, and just the devastation that Western North Carolina communities are experiencing by the climate-fueled storm. And so it puts a finer point even on what we're doing today, and I'm glad you're with us. Through 8 virtual sessions this week, we're working to close the gap between climate concern and what to do about it. And so, as I said, everyone has a role. It includes business, individuals, government. And we are very fortunate to have more than 30 professionals taking part with us this week to help accelerate the use of climate solutions in areas that they are active in. And so we hope you will take advantage of what's left of the program. And just a word before we get started about EarthShare North Carolina. We are a coalition of 25 environmental nonprofit organizations that work across the state. And what our vision is to foster a collaborative community of nonprofits, businesses, and individuals who are dedicated to a sustainable future for this and future generations. And so the way that we work on that is we provide opportunities for businesses and individuals to directly participate in the work of our environmental nonprofit organizations through a variety of programs. And in that way, we're all working for clean air and clean water, healthy places to live, safe food to eat, clean energy future, all of these things that we need. So I welcome you to learn more about EarthShare North Carolina. But I will move on now to some housekeeping so that we can I can share the experts that I referenced before. So we will have opportunity for Q&A later in the call. First, we'll hear some presentations. So there's a Q&A button on the Zoom function, and please just use that to submit your questions, and we'll monitor that. And then also the last 5 minutes of the call are going to be reserved for you to give us feedback. So we have a survey link that we will send you in the chat, and we ask you to go ahead and do that while you're on the call so that we can gain your feedback and incorporate it into our future programming. And as a thank you for doing that, we have 5 gift cards to Great Outdoor Provision Company that we're going to hold a drawing for at the end of the programming. So with that, I will move on to introducing our topic and speakers for today. And so I'll be serving as the moderator. The title for today is Reducing Cost and Carbon Through Energy Efficiency. We have a wonderful lineup of talking about hearing from a corporate example of implementing and getting started, and then being a leader in sustainability and energy efficiency in particular, and then moving into resources that are available to you and a practitioner who can give you the nuts and bolts of cost savings that are available. So I will start by introducing Zane Blicknigner, and Zane is the sustainability analyst for SAS Institute. And SAS is a recognized leader in sustainability, not only for tackling its own operations and emissions and globally, but also as an advocate for corporate sustainability overall. I know firsthand, they work with employees to foster a sense of engagement and sustainability, also their suppliers and customers to be a partner in reducing the impacts of operations across the board. So with that, welcome, Zane. Happy to have you with us.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. And let me just get my slides on here, and I'm going to pause my video while I'm sharing just to preserve bandwidth here and make sure we stay connected. All right, you should be able to see my slides here now. 1 second. So yeah, first, thanks again, Heather and EarthShare. It's great to be here today and participating on this panel along with Sophie and Matt. So I'm Zane Licknager, a sustainability analyst. And first, let me just start with a brief intro about SAS and the environmental program. So for a quick background, to put it simply, SAS data and AI solutions analyze any kind and any size of data using the latest statistical analytical techniques. And we are a global company with our world headquarters right over in Cary, North Carolina. We have $3 billion a year in revenue, over 12,000 employees. We're located in 50 countries, and we have over 4 million square feet of office space. And as a sustainability analyst, I am part of the environmental team, and we're responsible for implementing policies across global operations, providing guidance and support for all of our offices. And we also provide environmental risk assessments, performance reporting, and ensuring compliance with environmental regulations. And another key role that we fill is to baseline our energy and emissions data. We set our goals and measure our progress towards these targets. And at SAS, we're committed to creating a sustainable future by leveraging technology and data to tackle climate change. And we also recognize that reducing environmental impacts and ensuring the sustainability of natural resources is a shared responsibility, and this requires intentional and ambitious actions. So we also utilize our own analytical capabilities and our software solutions to implement sustainable business strategies and smarter operational models. And this includes supporting clean energy initiatives and using analytics to drive environmental improvements across our operations. And we're also ramping up investments in clean energy projects. We're adopting new business models and collaborating with local governments, universities, and our own suppliers to achieve our net zero targets. We are absolutely committed to reducing our energy consumption and increasing the use of renewable energy. Initiatives include on-site solar arrays. We have 2 solar farms on campus. We have rooftop arrays on many of our buildings. We've installed electric vehicle charging stations, and we're continually pursuing energy efficient technologies for our office buildings, for our data centers. And now, post-pandemic, we support a hybrid work schedule to reduce emissions related to employee commute and business travel. And I'm happy to say that we have made significant strides in managing our greenhouse gas emissions. In 2023, we received Science-Based Target Initiatives, or SBTI, validation for our emission reduction targets. And this includes a commitment to reduce our GHG emissions by 52.6% by 2030. I know that's a weird number. There's a reasoning behind that, though, and also to achieve net zero by 2050. And we are, of course, a supporter of the Paris Climate Accord, and we align our environmental practices with their international climate goals. And our focus is on energy conservation, emissions management, pollution mitigation, water conservation, and also biodiversity protection. And a couple of notable initiatives that we have are our green building projects. SAS utilizes leadership in energy and environmental design, or LEED guidelines, for new construction and remodeling and retrofitting our existing buildings. Since 2005, all new office buildings and data centers at our world headquarters have achieved LEED certification, and we're now well over 80% of the office space on campus is certified. And we've also implemented a smart campus project in Cary, which uses real-time analytics to optimize energy use and improve occupant comfort. We're also dedicated to transparent reporting of our environmental performance, and this includes responding to the annual CDP, formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project questionnaire. We answer the EcoVadis survey, and we align all our reportings with global standards like the Greenhouse Gas Protocol or Global Reporting Initiatives, GRIs. And we also apply ISO 14001 standards to drive continuous improvement in our environmental and energy management process. We have limited assurance to the ISO 14064 standard for our greenhouse gas emission inventories. And currently, we're actively pursuing ISO 50001, which is an energy management system, and we're looking to be certified sometime in early 2025. So to wrap things up, SAS's environmental policy reflects a comprehensive approach to sustainability, emphasizing ambitious targets. We have data-driven strategies, and it's a collaborative effort to mitigate climate change and just enhance our overall environmental stewardship. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Heather. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Zane. You can hear how SAS, all companies start somewhere, and SAS has built to this incredible reputation and level of impact over time, and we're going to get to that a little bit more in the panel and Q&A time. I'm very happy to next introduce Sophie Davis. Sophie is joining us today to provide a resource for businesses and institutions that are seeking to reduce their environmental impact and carbon footprint. I have long known about the Climate Corps program run by Environmental Defense Fund. I think it's extremely clever and practical, and places the Environmental Defense Fund, which is one of our nonprofit member organizations, in partnership with businesses and institutions to make an impact. So Sophie will explain more, but the program places fellows in your business to identify and develop a plan for energy efficiency, carbon reduction, and more. And I will say, I meant to say about Zane as well, but Sophie also served on the advisory committee for putting Climate Week together. And so we very much appreciate your role in that as well. So without further ado, Sophie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Heather. Really excited to be here. Yeah, just thanks for having me, and hopefully you all can see my slides. So just let me know if you can't for some reason, but my name is Sophie Davis. I use she, her pronouns. I work on the Climate Corps team that is out of Environmental Defense Fund, or EDF. I specifically work with the alumni of the program, but I also get to work on the recruiting side and working with host organizations and fellow recruiting. And it's a very collaborative team, which is why I'm able to be here with you all. And I'm based out of the Raleigh, North Carolina office, so excited to be here today. So just want to speak a little bit more on what the Climate Corps program is, what it can bring to your company, and how it can help you get started on your sustainability journey and help kind of like boost your capacity. So Climate Corps is a fellowship program for graduate students who are studying a variety of graduate programs. We've been running this fellowship out of Environmental Defense Fund for over 15 years now. And, we exist for two reasons as a program. One, we know that sustainability teams are too often strapped for capacity and tasked with ever evolving demands, and our program meets the capacity need with specially recruited, trained, and passionate professionals. The other reason that our program exists is to build the next generation of climate leaders and to ensure that they have targeted support from EDF experts and thousands in our professional sustainability network. So as a program, we also exist and operate in China and India as well. This presentation is primarily focused on our US program, but if your company does work and is based out of China and India as well, has operations there, and you think the Climate Corps program might be a good fit for your colleagues, then you can also reach out to me afterwards, and I'm happy to connect you with my colleagues that work on those programs. So here are just a few of the many companies that we have worked with. Many of our hosts return to our fellowship for sustainability talent year after year, and more than 80 of these companies have worked with us for more than 5 years. Our fellows are graduate students, and they, again, are working towards a variety of different degree programs, but they're coming in with a passion for sustainability. And our recruitment process is extremely competitive, and we work really hard to ensure that we are finding diverse candidates with a wide range of backgrounds and experiences. 70% of the fellows that we work with have 4 or more years of professional experience under their belt, and we recruit specifically for candidates who can jump into really fast-paced environments and thrive. Last year, we received more than 1,000 applications from over 200 universities. So we run a fellowship program, not an internship program, and how we support our fellows and host partners throughout this process is really what makes the difference. So we provide fellows with a week-long training at the beginning of the summer to get them caught up on all the latest strategies and approaches in the ever-evolving field of sustainability. And then throughout the summer, each fellow has a dedicated member of the team who serves to support them as an engagement manager and is a resource for them and connects them to EDF and experts. In addition, fellows are in cohorts organized by their project focus. So each cohort is led by an expert on EDF staff or in our Climate Corps network, and they meet with fellows about 5 times throughout the summer for targeted support. So this is just some more information about what it looks like to host and be a host organization. Companies must hire the fellow directly and pay the fellow at least $35 an hour, which comes out to a minimum of $15,400, including the week of training for a 10-week fellowship. I say at least $35 an hour because we also encourage companies to pay the fellows that they're working with alongside their peers if you have other part-time graduate level staff on board and they're compensated above this rate. Fellows should have a direct supervisor who can meet with them at least once a week and help them navigate the internal teams and processes in order to be successful. So these are the main project areas that Climate Corps fellows work on. EDF is most eager to support projects that are that will directly contribute to or integral to planning for quantifiable emissions reductions. In addition, we are also particularly interested in projects that contribute positively to communities who have been historically marginalized, particularly those impacted by environmental justice issues. And really, when the Climate Corps program started, most of the projects that fellows were working on were energy efficiency projects. So I was excited to join this call to just talk about how this type of work is really where the program started, and it's incredible to see how it's evolved to include all of these different project types as well, if that's something that you all are interested in. And all fellowships are 10 to 12 weeks long, and they happen during the summer, typically beginning after our fellow training, which is scheduled for the end of May. Fellowship dates are negotiable with the fellow depending on their school schedule and your internal needs. For the host application, it's due on December 19th. It actually just opened yesterday on October 1st, which is really exciting. And there are 2 questions that you really need to consider when you are thinking about applying. And those 2 questions are, what is the project and who is the ideal candidate? We know that a project might change over time, but we ask that you are specific enough in this application that we can help find the right person. And this is just a quick quote from someone who's been a longtime supporter, Jackson Love, who's the Director of Global Environmental Sustainability at PayPal, who, again, longtime supporter of the program, who's participated and hosted, just saying the capacity boost that fellows really bring in. Because, again, it's meant to be a capacity boost for your team to really see a project start and carry something that you all are able to pick up and carry on, even when the fellow moves on and ends their fellowship. So we also have a project database that's listed here. If you go to this website, if you just look up Environmental Defense Fund Climate Corps project database, you'll be able to see all of the projects that have happened since 2008. You know, the companies, the fellows that were placed there, what they worked on. This will just continue to give you a better idea of what this could look like for you all. And, you know, as we've kind of talked about today, and as we'll continue to talk about, sometimes it can feel overwhelming to know where to start in your sustainability journey as a company. And bringing on a Climate Corps fellow is a really great way to get started, or if you're already in the midst and in the process, to have them come in and to keep moving those projects forward. So thanks for giving me a few minutes just to talk about the program. I have a couple of folks' contact information, Michael Cronin and Sophie Marks. It does get a little confusing. There's a Sophie Davis and a Sophie Marks. You can reach out to either one of us. But I can also provide my contact information at the end if anyone has any questions or is interested in getting involved in the program. I'll be around for the Q&A portion, but thanks for letting me share some more about the program, and hope to see your application in this fall.
Thank you, Sophie. That was such a great amount of information in a very compact presentation. So thank you. I think others probably would like to see that slide again of all the different companies that you have worked with. So when we do Q&A, I might ask you to pull that up again. But I think there is a variety, and that's something that people can pay attention to, is that you don't have to be a global company to take advantage of this. And Sophie is right here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and so yeah, so it's a very important program operating right here. I am next very pleased to get to introduce you to Matt Pesky. He's coming to us from the Facilities Strategies Group, and is going to share with us a bit more about where the rubber hits the road, consulting with businesses specializing in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainability. And I think what I would find most comforting in getting started is that he provides decision-making support to building owners and managers to integrate energy management with building construction and renovation projects, and also can be your support in looking at financing for these things. So I am very pleased to pass it over to Matt to help talk to us and help us understand what incentives are in place and how companies do get started. So Matt, thank you for joining us.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt PC with Facility Strategies Group. We're a consulting engineering firm specialized in energy efficiency, sustainability, renewables. A lot of our work right now is in decarbonization and electrification. So we're doing some of the rollouts of some of the new advanced equipment, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, how to use it, how to integrate it. We're certainly working in North and South Carolina, green buildings, but a lot of the work towards electrification and decarb is also in the Northeast. So we're doing work in New York, Connecticut, Maine, and some work in Seattle. So when we look at, and I'll drop my videos so that we have a little more bandwidth. So when we look at how we're going to handle efficiency improvements and decarb and electrification, if those are some of your goals, part of it is going to depend on what the local grid looks like. Here in North Carolina, we have a pretty sizable solar initiative over the last, call it 20 years. So we're not bad in the decarb space. But to evaluate where you want to go with it, part of it needs to be where is the break even on your best practices, and where you're going to see those improvements if that's your goals. Otherwise, we're looking primarily at financing or savings to see what technologies are the best fit for our operations or even our processes. So I want to talk about some of that here. So one of the first things you'll want to be thinking about is what information do you know about your buildings, your portfolio buildings? If you've had audits done, if you had vendors come in, various people come in and look at your renewable options, and they kind of give you proposals. If you've done internal audits, you've paid for outside audits, those kinds of assessments, capital improvement program assessments, needs assessments, lots of different names for the same things, categorizing where your equipment is in its life cycle and what needs to be replaced and how it's operating are going to be important. Benchmarking where your energy and your carbon inventories are. That could be buildings if primarily you own buildings, but it could be fleets if your business includes vehicles. It could be around operations. It could be around purchasing. So if I'm buying and selling things on a regular basis, I'm going to be looking at how I can improve my footprint for those things. So you want to look at those and where are your the hogs, if you will, the things you do the most, that consume the most, that create the largest environmental impacts. And using Pareto's rule, focus on the few things that have the biggest impact. You start there. If you're providing services in a space that you work in is maybe intersects with energy or renewables, there's a ton of funding, and I'll be talking about that in some upcoming slides on that is focused on tribal or that is coming through states and local governments that's available for you to incorporate into your own stuff, but also to sell services to others, or even develop manufacturing facilities, depending on what your business is. So you would then analyze and prioritize these potential retrofits. You'll look at your cost, your carbon from each fuel source, and decide what is the combination that is going to either improve my bottom line, my simple payback, or does it even make sense to decarbonize if I'm primarily on coal at my local utility? So you've got to look at that and see where the overall benefit is. If you work in new development versus redevelopment, does it make sense to go above code? North Carolina, we're still on a relatively basic energy code. I think we were pretty close to adopting the 2021 International Energy Code. It didn't go through. And so there's when you're looking at new development, do I just do code? Or do I go above and beyond? And what are the advantages long-term for my footprint, and my carbon reduction, my efficiency, and my total cost of ownership for my assets? Looking then from there, what are my goals, my strategies, my actions? In particular, what are my resources that are available to me? And then we'll get into some of the IRA rebates and tax credits that are available. And what are those metrics that I'm going to track to see if I'm successful? So classic strategic planning, but applied to energy and sustainability and decarbonization. So the same ideas that carry through any kind of strategic planning effort. And what's important, particularly with these kinds of jobs, is who are my partners. If I'm working to build something, does the city have support that they can provide? Does the county? Can I get something through the state or the federal government? So looking for those, always trying to incorporate those into the process. I think there's also an important, we're at a point where there's some really advanced technologies coming out, particularly for heat pumps. In cold climates, particularly, we're now seeing the variable refrigerant flow technology being moved into a wide range of buildings and applications. They're being modified to be hybrid between air source and water source systems. That's coupled with, we're at this point where the EPA refrigerant changeouts are imminent and starting to happen. So you're going to have to make hard decisions as to what do I do with the equipment I have now? Is it up towards the end of life? Do I replace it now? Do I continue to pay higher refrigerant costs as those refrigerants are no longer available? Couple that in with technologies or ideas such as solar and microgrids. District geothermal. Does it make sense to put in a large geothermal system and sell the energy to my adjacent commercial partners, if you will, people in my area, in my town? There's technologies around water line and sanitary waste heat recovery that can be tied in to those kinds of systems as well as standalone. So looking at those on a large scale for energy development might be something you want to look at, depending on what kind of business you're in. And then if I'm, this is more common for cities like Columbia, South Carolina still has one. North Carolina A&T has a big steam system for its campus. If you're on existing older district energy systems, does it make sense to decentralize those, decouple different loads off of those systems? So when you're looking at a portfolio of buildings, if they're on a loop or a district system, does it make sense to consider fuel switches if it's going to reduce energy costs or reduce energy, improve efficiency or reduce carbon? So considering those kinds of things, both on a cost effectiveness basis, but also whether your systems are at the end of life or not. We've got some really big advances that have been happening in control systems, right? Even a lot of the sensors you can get with LoRaWAN, which is the long range sensors. You can send signals across cities for dozens of miles in some cases. So you could integrate facilities across long distances. You can send wireless within. But we also have data analytics tools now, and we can start to analyze these processes in buildings to determine sooner to come in and improve commissioning. And then many of these tools also have the ability to talk business to business or machine to machine behind the scenes and send out notifications to the vendors and say, hey, I've got a refrigerant problem. Hey, I've got a piece of equipment that is outside of range. So when you get alarms, it's automatically sending information to people to get it fixed sooner. And then within a process environment, industrial, those kinds of things, improving your process improvements, and looking at that. So frequently those systems are kept separate, but a lot of big businesses are working now to integrate both the external energy and building related equipment with improved processes. So if you're making syrup, you're making some sort of plastic product, how do I improve the overall sustainability there? All right, so how do we pay for some of this? So this is kind of the core here. IRA came out in I think it was 2022 August, forget the exact date. The tax credits were retroactive to January of 2022. So any of those that are out there and available and potentially apply to something you're working on, you could get them today. Most of the rebates are flowing through intermediaries, but they're going to be available through 2031. So things that you might, sources or funding that you might want for electrification or decarb, you get a renewable and efficiency tax credits for sure for various building types and segments. A couple that I look at a lot is geothermal. Maybe you have always wanted to work on a geothermal job and get one incorporated in your portfolio. The geothermal has been added to the production tax credits. So now you can get at least 30% of the first cost paid for. And in fact, as long as the vendors are building their systems largely in America, you can get an extra 10% for made in America equipment. So you can get up to 40% for geothermal. It buys down the bore field for sure, and it buys down a chunk of the building equipment. And it's now bringing geothermal on parity with many of the air source options that you have. There are, as part of IRA, a ton of training requirements and that apprentice requirements and Davis-Bacon requirements, or prevailing wage requirements. But as long as those are met, you're eligible for the full amount of these credits. Solar renewable credits were increased or brought back. There's also credits for doing solar related work in disadvantaged communities. One of the nice things is if I'm a nonprofit or I'm a local government, I can monetize those directly to pay for the projects. I don't have to run them through a for-profit doing a power purchase agreement or a development deal where I'm passing it through or syndicating the tax credits in some way in order to bring them into the project. So it gives you more options as a nonprofit or a local state government. The 179D tax credit has been substantially increased. You can get between $2.50 to $5 a square foot, as long as you've got 20%, I think it's 20% up to 50% energy reduction relative to the 2021 International Energy Code. For new construction of housing, there's the 45L has been increased and extended. There's also a zero energy option in that. You'll find a lot of these monies are geared towards multifamily housing, residential housing, tribal, but there's a good number of programs that are running through state and local and are targeted to manufacturing. And many of the rebates can also stack with your tax credits. So depending on what you analyze and what your options could be, you can get some of that paid for. So two to be aware of that I look at a lot because they're specifically towards buildings. Department of Energy has 2 rebate programs. that are coming through Department of Energy, which then funneled to the North Carolina Energy Office. North Carolina has 209 million available for these two programs. They're pretty close to rolling them out, I think probably by first quarter of next year. But they're going to be geared towards single and multifamily buildings. So if you work in that segment, it gives you a tool to get work paid for. The Environmental Protection Agency actually got the bulk of this huge amount of funding through IRA, and their programs are extremely diverse. So one of those is a Solar for All program that is rolling through North Carolina. They got 156 million for that. If you have if you've got heavy vehicles, class 6 and 7, there's grants to put in electric heavy duty vehicles. If you're in a coastal community, there's funding for resiliency. So it's across the gamut. It's worth looking at to see if it applies to something you're working on. And then there's other monies coming through Bureau of Indian Affairs, through HUD, through Department of Transportation, and Department of Agriculture. Tax credits in particular come through IRS and through Treasury. Huge number of tax credits available. So if you're doing work in developing new energy facilities, carbon capture, so it applies to utilities and local development. There's tax credits for vehicles, so that applies to most of us as private citizens that pay taxes. You can get tax credits on electric vehicles, but there's money for refueling stations if you want to build those and add those to your facilities and your sites. There's monies for manufacturing, for fuels. There's monies out there for efficiency, home improvements, all related to tax credits. And just an example, so here's solar. With the monies, you can basically pile solar onto any space that doesn't have shading. Geothermal. Here on the left is the heat pump, and then some piping, and on the right is where it comes through the foundation wall. So it's making these technologies available to us. Heat pumps in general, there's a lot of different options now, depending on what you're looking for. These are some pictures I had for residential multifamily, which ties back into the DOE funding. There's a new technology that saddlebags over an existing windowsill, and that way you don't have to kind of retrofit the wall or bring in stuff through the building. You can minimize the amount of construction. So that's it for me. Let me drop the share.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So much good information, so many resources related to making this affordable for businesses of all sizes, and local governments and even nonprofits. And so I want us to have some time to answer anyone's questions. So please do, if you have questions, put them now in the Q&A. And as we're getting started, I have a couple of questions that I'd like to get us started with. And I think my first, Zane, might start with you, which is just, where would you suggest a business get started?
Yeah, sure. A great place to start for all of us is the baseline, right? If you want to plot a path forward, you have to know where you are. And that's one of the things we initially did way back in the day, but really you need to do kind of an environmental assessment, energy assessment. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It could be at the utility bill level. Energy Star, we found, is a great program to begin with. Really, it's just entering all of your data into their portal and then it'll give you a score, and then you can identify some areas, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. You can see where your significant energy uses are, and then from there you can plan some actions and your energy conservation measures. You can prioritize it on these are things that we need to do, or these are just some of the easier things to do. So really just getting a baseline, seeing where your energy is coming from, where it's going to in your mechanical systems, your buildings, or whatever, and then really looking for those easy opportunities to start, because more likely than not, there's going to be an opportunity there. And then if you start with some of those low-hanging fruit, bigger areas of opportunity, then you can use that money to funnel into further programs and doing a little deeper dive. You don't have to tackle everything at once. It really is just getting started and finding out where you are.
Yeah. And I just wanted to double back. You said the Energy Star website is where you can insert some of that information just on your own.
Yeah, it's there's Energy Star, which actually rates appliances and things like that, but there's Energy Star Portfolio Manager, where you can get in and register a building, ask for some high level metrics, size of the building, use of the buildings, things like that. You enter your information, and then what it will do is rate you. It's kind of giving you what percentile you fall into. And if you're above 75%, then you can be Energy Star certified. But it compares like to like. It's not taking like a financial institution and then comparing it to a manufacturing plant. So it's specific to your building use.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent tool. For anyone, I'd say, what have you seen as the biggest barrier for companies to get started? Sophie, it looks like you can answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the Climate Core team and the companies that we work with and our partners, a lot of the barrier that we do see is capacity. Whether it's like from just like a number of people on staff, or if it's from resources and where resources are being allocated within organizations, that can feel really overwhelming if you don't feel like you have the people behind it that can get started on it, or the resources to dedicate towards it. And so that's where we really like to emphasize the Climate Core program, because if it feels like just really overwhelming and not knowing where to go, you can bring someone on for that 10 to 12 weeks to even help, like Zane said, create that baseline, do some analysis, figure out where you are, because once you have that, you are able to take some more of the tangible next steps. So I think from what we see, it really does seem to be like a resource, and capacity seems to be a pretty big barrier.
Yeah. I in the business solar session yesterday, Carrie Stewart from Green State Power mentioned that 3 years ago, a lot of businesses were making goals around and some commitments around investing in solar, but didn't have the budgets. And now there's a lot more, I guess, emphasis and encouragement from the boards of those organizations to create that budget and to get it started. Is this something that's familiar to you all? And do you have any advice on getting from commitment to implementation? And you're on mute, Matt.
I would say the sources that are available now can at least buy down the bulk of the cost, and it can bring the average payback to closer to 10, 12 years and sometimes less. So that's historically been the challenge, is where to cover the cost. If you can internally finance it, if you're going to have the building for a long enough time, the equipment will last 20, 25 years. So as long as the payback is less, there's also some energy efficient sources of funding for financing as well. So the hard decision is figuring out how to get the delta paid for, the part that's not covered, and where you can pick it up. And that's where the economic analysis usually comes in, is to show that it'll get picked up within a certain time period.
And that companies like yours specifically work on that piece for companies as well. And is your footprint Charlotte? Do you work beyond that area? And is there a resource that you point people to find those folks who can help businesses through this?
Yeah, in North and South Carolina, we're here, so we're in Charlotte. But we generally work up the East Coast. We work nationally, and where what's interesting about this area, energy efficiency, renewables, states that have bigger system benefit charge programs have bigger energy industries. I think we saw that in North Carolina with solar. We now have a lot of solar developers here. We have manufacturers and other people here, and it's because it all got prompted by the available feed-in tariffs that made it possible. So on the rebate side, we don't have as much, so there's not as a deep an industry here for that. The IRA plus the local rebates will help. But I think part of it gets to planning on the front end, figuring out what you can apply to different buildings that you own or different equipment and other things that you own. Figure out the life of that equipment, where it sits in its life cycle, whether you've got maintenance issues with it, that it needs to be retired early. And then from that, you can start to plan out how you're going to handle it, whether it's full replacement, gut renovation, or it's individual system capital improvement programs. But that usually flows through a process figuring out, as Zane said, figure out what you need, what has to happen. And then from there, you got to design it, replace it. And so now you're starting to bring in professionals that work in your particular space that have the capacity to do what you want to do. But you can tell them what you want to accomplish, develop design standards, procurement documents, those kinds of things.
Great. Yes, definitely that we saw that solar market blossom, and we'll expect the same here for those resources. I think the last question that I'll offer, and let's see, first we have a question in the Q&A, so I want to get to that. Question from Ian is for Sophie. Are there any discounts for nonprofits to use the Climate Corps program? And so there's also a question for everyone, but I'll stop there. Sophie?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the majority of the host organizations we work with are private sector, but we do work with a number of nonprofits and other public sector entities. So governments, whether it's city, county, etc. So we have different ways that we can kind of figure out funding when it comes to nonprofits. It looks different for different organizations. So if you have a specific nonprofit in mind, I don't know if I can put my email in the chat if I have access to that, or if Melissa can, feel free to reach out to me and I can share some more of like what the different funding opportunities look like.
Great, thank you. And then the second part of that question for everyone, for a nonprofit that does affordable housing, tax rebates for improvements and retrofits on existing homes are often non-starters. Can you speak to other avenues such as payout at purchase within the IRA, or is there anyone that you would recommend that Ian connect with for this information?
I can cover that. I talked to it a little bit early on. If you're interested in solar, the production tax credits have there's a separate law that was introduced to allow those credits to be monetized as a single payment available to the nonprofit or to the local government. So then you can use it as part of paying for the equipment. So that's now available. Otherwise, you had to run it through a power purchase agreement or run it through the for-profit business that was doing the work. That still applies for the 179D credit. That has to run through either the engineers or the constructor. But usually you work out a deal and you share. So some of it comes back to the owner, the nonprofit in that case. But the other options, particularly for affordable housing, there's a ton of money coming through the Department of Energy funding that's going to be managed by the Energy Office. I think, I forget the number, 200 million is going to be available through two different programs for retrofit. If you hit a 20% reduction in energy BTUs, you get up to 4,000 per dwelling unit, depending on what level of affordability it is. So very low income, you get 100% of the project costs up to 4,000, and 8,000 if you're above 35% reduction. But you can also be eligible for straight electrification if that's an interest. And there's a whole series of individual rebate values up to 14,000 total per dwelling unit that are available. And again, that program, same as the other for efficiency. If you're different levels of affordability might reduce it. But if it's very low income and moderate to low income, they tend to get 100% of it. And so you work through that. There are monies that are available through EPA as well that can apply. And for disadvantaged communities, there's an extra tax credit for solar where you get an extra 10%. So you can get up to 40% or more.
Great. Thank you,
in
Matt.
tax credit.
So there's so much information or so many great programs right now, particularly for the low income population. So thank you for sharing those. And will you say again the entity within DEQ that's running that?
It's going to flow through the Energy Office.
The Energy Office. Great.
I've actually forget what they specifically they're calling themselves, but
yeah.
I had a link in the slides. So if we give the slides out, they can go to the Department of Energy site, click on the state and find the details.
Great. And I think
there's a couple links in.
Yeah, sorry. I think Melissa already put that link in the chat. So we'll go back to that link and that information will be there. We have 2 more minutes that you all reserved for your time with us today. So I'm going to ask you to go to the link that Melissa just put in the webinar chat and give us your feedback for the session. Again, we will use that to inform our future programming. So it's very important. It gets put to good use. We have a drawing for 5 gift cards for people who do give us their feedback throughout the week as a thank you. And then I also just want to share with you the next session is at noon, and that's on food and climate, saving money, reducing waste, and weighing in on the future food. And then tomorrow we have what is a good clean tech job at 9:30, and then choosing our transportation future at 12. And that rounds out the virtual sessions for Climate Week. So again, I hope you can take advantage of these resources and professionals who are taking part this week. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt, Zane, and Sophie for this wonderful information. And I hope to see you all later today or tomorrow. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.